Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for coming. In 2003, I was invited here in Michigan and had a lecture about Japanese religious history. And that was first time for me to give lectures in English. So at that time, I was very, very nervous. But thanks to the good atmosphere of University of Michigan, I did a good lecture. And after that, fortunately, I have several times to give lectures in English, some countries other than Japan. But unfortunately, my English has not been so improved. So I have to apologize. My speaking English is not so good. Of course, later this lecture, I'll be very happy to accept questions from you. But please ask me just easy questions. And today, here I brought my manuscript for my talk today in Braille. And actually, many people ask me, this Braille is English Braille or Japanese Braille. This one is English Braille, and each language has each Braille system. So Japanese, we have a Japanese Braille, and English, we have English Braille. And in general, Japanese, from junior high school and high school, we learn English. Same as in School for the Blind. We learn English Braille from junior high school. So maybe, I hope I can read it smoothly, bad pronunciation, sorry, but smoothly. But actually, hearing and speaking is very, very bad. So first I'll read this paper, and between my presentation, I'll show you some DVD, and I'll ask you to listen to some CDs from Goze music. Okay, so let's start my presentation. A Goze refers to a blind female musician who traveled around Japan with shamisen. Shamisen is a Japanese plucked stringed instrument. Although the associations of the blind musicians existed widely throughout the country in the early modern period, from the late modern period onward, only a handful of associations, such as the one in Takada and one in Nagaoka, continued to exist in Niigata Prefecture and engaged in the group activities. With the passing of Haru Kobayashi, she was died in 2005. Haru Kobayashi, who was known as the last Goze, the culture of Gozes that had been maintained by visually impaired people disappeared completely from Japanese society in the 21st century. In the 1970s, the history of Gozes, who possessed variable intangible cultural properties, and the actual conditions of their lives were broadly introduced through novels such as the one written by Tsutomu Mizukami and the paintings by Shinichi Saito. However, nowadays, there are few young people who know about their existence. Previously, the Goze issues were often discussed in the context of melancholy and tragedy, such as a disabled female who embraced life-enduring discrimination, or a lonely musician who was forced to continue traveling with a physical handicap. After the World War II, with the expansion of the welfare service for the disabled and the enhancement of education in schools for the blind, their culture came to be recognized as the relics of the pre-modern times, and the fact that there is no successor for it is also considered as the inevitabilities of history. To be sure, even if they became the full-fledged Gozes after ascetic training for many years, they tended to be in unstable living situations. It was not unusual for them to spend more than 300 days a year traveling. In addition, it is believed that there were many Gozes who fell dead on the street or died from an accident during their journey. It is gratifying that the visually impaired go to universities as a matter of course, and they have more career choices than ever before, though gradually. However, would it be okay that the Goze culture will be forgotten completely? Today, I would like to focus on the hands of a Goze and approach the relevance and the possibility of the Goze culture from three different angles that are touching the sound, touching the color, and touching the heart. Taking a hint from the Goze Uta, Goze Uta is a Goze folk songs, Goze Uta, which Gozes created and spread as their own oral traditions, I intend to clarify the role that the tactile culture of the visually impaired should play in today's society. Okay, from now, my presentation will be three-part, as I told you, touching the sound, and touching the color, and finally, touching the heart. Before that, I'll show you DVD. It's a Japanese TV news program show focusing on my activity. Last January, I went to Akiyama-go. It's a very, very rural place in Nagano Prefecture. And Akiyama-go is very famous for a lot of snow. Maybe I think here in Aba it is more colder. But Akiyama-go, a lot of snow. And I went to Akiyama-go to do some field work about Goze. And after that, that field work was in January. And after that, from April last year, I had a monthly, small workshop about Goze culture in my museum, once a month. So, because since last August, I'm now staying in Chicago as a visiting scholar, and I'll go back to Japan this end of March. So I hope maybe from this April, I will continue my small workshop about Goze in my museum. Anyway, I'll show you DVD, and I'm very sorry again, this DVD is all in Japanese. So sometimes I'll try to translate it into English, but I hope even if you don't understand Japanese, you can see beautiful Japanese scenery.
盲目の文化人類学者広瀬幸次郎さん。かつて日本で存在した目の見えない女旅芸人ゴゼの足取りを探し求めています。調査で使うのは視覚以外の感覚。指先が記憶を掘り起こします。
A blind anthropologist is now researching on Goze, blind female musician, by using 5 senses. It's an evening news show.
目が見える人は普段かなり視覚に頼って生活しています。しかし視覚以外の感覚を鋭くすると新しい世界が広がるかもしれません。
大阪の民族学博物館に勤務する文化人類学者広瀬幸次郎さんは目が見えません。博物館では触ることを楽しんでもらう展示
Some explanation about my activity in museums.
古い芸能の研究のために雪の信州を訪れました。
盲目の文化人類学者広瀬幸次郎さん。
I commute to my museum in Osaka every day by myself. To walk alone with my white cane, I use the sense of hearing and feel the wind here and there.
それはこの辺から響き出して。それは
Change the sound
あるからで。
because of the bridge. So I can recognize the sound when I come to bridge.
広さを把握します。これが目印ならぬ耳印となって広い公園の中でも迷いません。
My museum is located in a large park in Osaka. So I have to commute by walk.
体全体で世界を認識しています。
風の開ける感じ。割とこうだから左側
I feel the wind.
まあ右側もそうですけど開けてこう広い場所に出たなっていうのがその風の流れでわかる。
広瀬さんが失明したのは13歳の時。視覚を失い落ち込む中、ある出会いがありました。
まあ一番大きいのはやっぱり展示ですね。その触るっていうことにこう開眼するっていうのはちょっと文学的な表現かも。
I lost my eyesight at the age of 13 and learned
そういう意
Braille.
味では新しい世界との出会いだった。
Through Braille, I have realized the importance of
展
touching.
示受験者で初めて京都大学に合格。広瀬さんは見えないことを逆に生かして触覚による研究を進めてきました。民族学博物館に入ってからは世界を触ると名付けた展示をスタートさせました。
Last year, I have opened the new touch gallery in my museum.
うまくな音が出ませんけど、これもちろん
広瀬さんが提案するのは触って感じることの面白さ。
もっと大きな楽器が。
視覚優位な今の社会への問いかけです。
I have many opportunities to give lectures at elementary schools to focus on the tactile culture.
気づいた人。形は触ったらわかる。
形は触ったらわかる。
To touch, you can learn shape and texture.
ちょっと考え方を変えると、目が見えない人っていうのはみんなが今日アイマスクしていろんなものを触ったように、よりその触るとか音を聞くっていうことをたくさんしている人たち。
Blind people are good at the sense of touch.
見えないことは本当にマイナスの障害なのか。長年抱いてきた思いを広瀬さんは4月からの展示で表現したいと考えています。選んだテーマは盲目の女旅芸人ゴゼです。
I'm now studying about
三味
Goze.
線の弾き語りで農村を渡り歩きました。視覚障害の女性の自立した仕事として長野や新潟では昭和の中頃まで受け継がれていました。
It's a very traditional Japanese song.
ゴゼが奏でる民謡や物語に農村の女性たちは涙したといいます。すでに展示する資料は集まっていました。しかし広瀬さんはまだゴゼ歌の本当の魅力が実感できていませんでした。
I have gathered some materials related to Goze,
のものを触って、
but I do not understand the real meaning of Goze 歌、Goze
風の
songs.
立場で僕が何かを伝える、雪の中を旅したってこともあったと思うんですけど、そういう体験を自分自身もしてみて、まあ、そこからこう伝えるものっていうのはおのずとこうものをただ並べるだけとはやっぱり違ってくると思うんですよね。
So I have decided to visit Akiyama-go, which is famous for a lot of snow.
長野と新潟の県境にある栄村秋山郷。今もゴゼの文化が色濃く残っている地域です。
Many Gozes have visited Akiyama-go for a long time.
音静かですね。何にも聞こえないですね。
Because of lots of snow, we cannot hear no
時
sound.
は広瀬さんにとって音のない世界でした。
京子さんすいません、今日はよろしくお願いします。
こんにちは。お世話になります。
I visited some of villagers'
に
house.
訪れた広瀬さんを秋山郷の人々はねぎらい歓迎してくれました。
すいません。よいしょ。お邪魔します。
福原健一さんの家ではゴゼが来るたびに宿を提供しました。彼女たちが来ると村は一変したそうです。
若い時鍛えた人はね、今日はゴゼ来たから来てくださいって言うんでさ、だからそうやってやって、その前にはまたゴゼさんは門付きで村を回ってあるから皆さん来てください、そういう言葉も出てるからさ、結構集まるんですよ。
Some of villagers are talking about Goze, and they said they were very glad to hear Goze songs.
とにかくね、知らない土地に行ってすぐにその、
Both of them are in their 80s,
ね、そういうのを感じ取
over 80 years
っ
old.
て、そして楽しませてくれる。
ゴゼさんでも来なきゃこの地方にさ、そういう娯楽店がないから、だから地元の人も喜んでさ。
あの子よい子
This is a song she learned from Goze.
そうたなら三年三月でもなるだけ
わずかに見える先導役がいたものの、盲目のゴゼにとって秋山郷までの険しい山道は命がけだったはずです。
50と三によ
大丈夫ですか？あ、ごめんなさい。
Why did Gozes visit Akiyama-go, which is far from the city? I did my fieldwork around
な
there.
ぞるように広瀬さんはゴゼの泊まった宿を触り、歩いたであろう道をたどりました。広瀬さんの問いに答えてくれたのが94歳の山田義輝さんでした。
毎年来てたんですか？
毎年。
Yeah, he is 94 years old. Still quite active.
それから8月9月の頃よく来てたね。だからそのゴゼさんたちもここまで来るにはやっぱり気持ちの問題なんだね。骨を折ってきてもみんなが喜んでくれるのが何よりも、まあ金はさ欲しいぐらいねえけど何よりもありがたいっていう。今度あれやってくれや、またこれやってくれや、また来らっしゃいとかさ、そういうふうになんていうかな、まあ言葉とか金に合わせらんでまた親しみっていうかね。
He said that Goze came to Akiyama-go because many villagers are waiting for them eagerly.
ゴゼであり村人の心っていうのが本当に触れ合う場として、ゴゼ宿での演奏
It's inside of the small museum in
して
Akiyama-go.
もらうとかっていう単純な関係じゃなくて、お互いに作用し合って影響し合っていく、その中でゴゼ歌っていう何百年も続く文化が生まれてきたっていうことを改めて今回現地に来て、確認することができ、
Goze and villagers have cooperated with each other to make unique Goze songs.
研究室ではあまり魅力が感じられなかったゴゼ歌。広瀬さんは秋山郷の資料館で聞き直してみることにしました。
The sound of Goze songs is quite different in Akiyama-go compared with the CD sound when I listened to it in Osaka.
言 こちらだと割とこう優しく広がっていってこう吸収されていくような感じがしましたね。平等にこうゴゼさんが発する音に、聞いてる人たちがこうなんか包まれて、僕自身がイメージできた世界っていうものを追体験って言ったらあれですけど、その来館者の方にもこう伝えて一緒のものをこう感じてもらえたら。
Now I would like to create a new exhibition about Goze based on my fieldwork.
じっくり解説を聞いてもらった後にいろり端でゴゼ歌を聞いてもらおう。広瀬さんはそう決めました。触れること、聞くことを通してゴゼが秋山郷で感じた心が伝わることを期待しています。
As I told you, after this fieldwork, I have just started a workshop about Goze from last April. The workshop is mainly focusing on touching and hearing. So, and I hope after returning to Japan, I will continue this workshop. Okay, so I will continue my presentation. First part is touching the sound. Kikue Sugimoto, who was the last Oyakata master of the Takada Goze, and also designated as an important intangible cultural asset holder, continued her journey as Goze even after World War II, stating that she did not know other means of living. By the way, at the DVD you listen to the Goze songs. That song was played by Kikue Sugimoto. She is very, very famous and last active Goze in 1970s. After being retired from the journey, she spent her quiet late years with two of her disciples at her home in Takada. It was after 1965 that she was picked up by the media and began to hold recitals in Tokyo and other places. Her last words shortly before her death were, "I've already forgotten the lyrics of the songs. There is no point in living." For Sugimoto, who became blind in her childhood, her vocation as a Goze must have been the ultimate one, and there was no alternative but to work as an itinerant musician. With the earnest attempt by Sugimoto and many other Gozes towards the hard work and training, acknowledging that there was no other choice, the Goze songs have been inherited. Gozes in the early modern period composed a variety of the Goze songs by reconstructing the raw materials, such as Sekkyobushi. Sekkyobushi is a sermon ballad, and Joruri. Joruri is also dramatic recitation accompanied by shamisen, traditional Japanese music. The narrative prayers called Saimon Matsuzaka, traditional Japanese style of instrumental music for the koto, and kudoki, oral recitation, are regarded as representatives, and they involve recitation of long narratives to the accompaniment of a shamisen. The Goze songs were handed down from the masters to the disciples, from their hand to hand. A master took her disciples' hands into her own from behind and taught how to play the shamisen. Their hands became deformed and stiff by holding plectrums for many years. From their high-trained hands and fingertips, the sounds with fine variations in intensity, tune, pitch, and length continued to be spun. The narration of a Goze without words was passed down from mouth to ears through the sense of touch and hearing. it is truly marvelous that they should have memorized a long list of narratives by immersing themselves to the task and by telling themselves that there was no other way of living. Furthermore, they changed the narrative styles flexibly according to the needs of the audience. The Goze songs abounded in ingenuity, improvisation, and repetition here and there in order to attract the audience. Although there is a widespread notion that Goze songs are gloomy and soulful, in reality, they often incorporated popular songs and comic stories with ingenuity to bring further entertainment to the parties. Lafcadio Han, he's a very famous novelist in Japan, and he originally from Europe and some experience as a journalist here in US. And in his 30s, he came to Japan. Lafcadio Han, who listened to the Goze songs in Kobe during the Meiji period, wrote his impression as follows. I've never heard anything as beautiful as their songs. In the voice of a Goze, all sorrows and beauties in life and all pains and pleasure were vibrated. Han, who did not understand Japanese fully, declared that the true nature of the Goze songs was a vibration. In the original text, Han used the word thrilled and quivered. Probably, Japanese people before the Meiji period appreciated the Goze songs as a pure vibration of a sound, reverberation, transcending the language. A wide range of repertoire of the Goze songs were imprinted in the bodies of blind women as the reverberations in a 7/5 syllable meter or the sound in 7/7 syllable meter with rhythm and melody by using the movement of their hands. Of course, you know Japanese haiku or Japanese short waka. It consists of 7/7 syllables or 7/5. For example, haiku, 5/7/5 5/7/5 syllables. This is very rhythmical for Japanese people. Sorry. In addition, the sounds of the Goze songs that were incorporated into the hearts of the listeners also contained power to touch their heartstrings. Where does such power come from? As can be seen in the quote of Sugimoto and from the sharp insight by Han, the Goze songs were not simply the music, but the life of Goze itself. Sugimoto also said, I am happy. I can do everything in old age and in the dark. The sense of touch was considered the most important sense in her daily life. Being good at sewing, it is said that she could thread a needle in no time using her lips and tongue. Her house was always spick and span because she never failed to clean the floor. At meals, while traveling, she always made sure there were no leftovers on her plate, using her fingers with dexterity. The hands of a Goze often functioned better than the eyes of the sighted people. A Goze song was composed of the voice of a blind woman and the sound of a shamisen on the surface. However, behind this auditory information there was a revelation of the life of a Goze different from the sighted people. The power of the Goze songs, created by using the body sense other than the sense of sight, that is to say, every skin sensation of the whole body, attracted the sighted people, who tend to rely solely on their eyes. The characteristics of the performing art by Goze, who created the original revelation with all their strength and heart, could be described as touching the sound. Okay, next part, the second part is touching the color. Chikuzan Takahashi, who gained considerable popularity as a tsugaru shamisen player, said as follows: I want to produce a sound that can evoke tangible images by listening to it closely and express a clearer, brighter, and a bigger world than the visible world. Takahashi adhered to the sound representing tsugaru, just listening to the sound played by a tsugaru shamisen, and polished his artistic skills all of his life. It is a well-known fact that the history of Japanese music has been supported by the numerous visually impaired people. The blind musicians created and nurtured the original melodies during the course of pursuing the world with no visual sense. It can be said that, like the tsugaru shamisen played by Chikuzan Takahashi, the Goze songs also belong to the same line of the blind music. To begin with, the tale of the Heike Monogatari, narrated by a biwa hoshi, a Japanese lute-playing minstrels, which is the origin of the performing arts of the blind, was established on the basis of the narration provided to propitiate the departed souls of the Taira family. In historical materials, it is recorded that the blind women in the medieval times, considered as the roots of Gozes, told the story of the tale of Soga Monogatari, with the accompaniment of a tsuzumi. Tsuzumi is a Japanese hand drum. So before using shamisen, Gozes are good at playing tsuzumi. The tale of Soga was also a performing art in the medieval times on the subject of the memorial service for the departed soul. The afterworld controlled by the departed was a familiar existence for Japanese people in the pre-modern times that could be said to be the source of the world with no visual sense. Okay, now I'd like you to listen to CD music. It is from Heike Monogatari, played by biwa hoshi. As I mentioned, biwa hoshi started singing this Heike Monogatari, tales of Heike, at least in the 13th century. And in the 14th century, Heike Monogatari was completed by biwa hoshi. So maybe at least 800 years biwa hoshi handed down this traditional music. But unfortunately, nowadays in 21st century, in Japan we have only one biwa playing minstrel. His name is Imai, Mr. Imai. This CD was played by Imai. And of course, you know, Heike Monogatari is a very, very long story. So today I'll introduce you only one part. This is a very famous part called Nasu no Yoichi. Nasu no Yoichi is a samurai's name, and he is good at shooting. at a battle between Heike and Genji, he shoot the center of fan. And it is interesting, Biwa Hoshi, they are totally blind. But in Heike Monogatari, there are lots of descriptions about colors. For example, samurai's costume, black horse, and fan is a white, and center is a red. Lots of description about colors. So I think even if blind people, they cannot see the scenery, but they can image and transcend the image of battle by using their voice and biwa sound. Anyway, so please listen to Nasu no Yoichi. That's the beginning. And again, this is all in Japanese. But as I mentioned, like Lafcadio Han, he do not understand Japanese, but he can get impression, very, very deep impression from the sound. So I hope even if you cannot understand Japanese, you can appreciate this old Japanese traditional music. So anyway, listen to Nasu no Yoichi, please. It's the sound of biwa. Okay, please turn off. Thank you. This is just a beginning of Nasu no Yoichi, and very, very beginning of battle between Genji and Heike. And unfortunately, this song continues at least 1 hour. So maybe it makes you a little sleepy. So anyway, this is a Heikyoku, Heike Monogatari, played by Biwa Hoshi from, at least 14th century. The style of music not changed. Anyway, okay. The indispensable element to add reality of the world with no visual sense to the Goze songs must have been the travel. Kikue Sugimoto traveled around villages in Niigata Prefecture and Nagano Prefecture repeatedly every year and gave a performance at various Goze yados. Goze yado means places provided for Gozes to stay. While she commented positively about a trip to Nagano, that The wind was wonderful. That made me feel as if I saw greenery with my eyes. She also had a harsh experience of walking up the mountain in a snowstorm. It was common for the landowners of the respective villages to provide accommodation for Gozes. But welcoming the Gozes' visit and preparing a place for them to give a recital parties became an economic burden on the part of the landlords. For this reason, providing accommodation for Gozes was considered a privilege as well as a kind of obligation for the landlords. The decline of landlords due to the land reformation in 1947, which resulted in the decrease in the number of goze-yados, became a factor for the demise of the Goze's travel. As Chikuzan Takahashi stated his thought about his kadozuke, kadozuke is a performance in the front of the gate of houses, that I never thought I had a hard time. I just walked because I had no money. There is no doubt that the travel was the last measures and the last resort to obtain food and money for the male blind art performers. On the other hand, the journey of Gozes was an indispensable element to develop and nourish the Goze songs. Gozes encountered the world with no visual sense through traveling and converted their feeling into the songs by their rich imagination and creativity. In general, Gozes traveled in a small group of 3 to 5 people. Leading the group was a sighted woman called tebiki, guide, or a partially sighted woman followed by the blind women. They carried a stick in their right hand and walked in a single line, each putting her left hand lightly on the baggage of a person in front of her. Even today, when more than 2 visually impaired people work together, they tend to walk in single file in a train formation. Standing abreast in a rank leads to increased risk of running into obstacles. So it is the wisdom of living to move ahead in a single file. By sensing the subtle movements up and down or sideways of the shoulders or luggage of the person walking in front of you, you can aware the uneven surface and the change of course. The scene of the blind people traveling long distance in a group looked mysterious and had quite an impact for the sighted people. Gozes were awed as sacred visitors from the world with no visual sense. The cases where Gozes played active roles in practicing a folk religion in connection with the wishes for curing of diseases, abundant crops, sericulture, and easy delivery, etc., are too numerous to count. The Goze songs were not confined to the level of the popular entertainment, but they played complicated and unique functions. It was also common practice for Gozes to make great use of their sense of touch while they were traveling. They gained an understanding of their surroundings by their skin sensation throughout the body. Although they could not see the actual sight, they could visualize the scene in their own way. The facts we see with our sense of sight only represent the part of the objects. Goze closed in on the essence of the things and the truth of the world with no visual sense by a different pathway from the sighted people. As Sugimoto said, that I felt as if I were seeing the greenery. The accumulation of numerous actual experiences added width and depth to the Goze songs. At a time when there were no TVs, radios, and the internet, what one saw in the actual life was limited. The majority of the sighted people who were the listeners of the Goze songs seldom set out on a journey and spent their lives without leaving their villages where they were born and raised. It was the role of a Goze to provide various knowledge and comfort to these settled people. The information brought to people by Gozes covered a wide range of topics, including legends, old stories, regional history, and the incident in the nearby villages. On the whole, the Goze songs was a powerful tool to make people feel as if they were able to feel the world with no visual sense. Not only did Gozes serve as messengers from the world with no visual sense, but they were also producers who gave the sense of actually seeing the truth that the sighted people had not seen before. It would be fair to say that the sensitivity capable of feeling the unseen world as if you were seeing the world can be rephrased as touching the color. Okay, final part is a touching heart. And maybe I think I will need 10 minutes. So if you have lectures in afternoon, please don't hesitate to go out now. So now I will continue the part of touching the heart, final part. Okay, as you can see from the previous description, the true nature of the Goze songs can be summarized in the two words, touching the sound and touching the color. The appeal of touching the sound and touching the color was cultivated and reproduced by the efforts of Gozes. And more importantly, the Goze songs served as a trigger for the sighted people, the listeners, to share the dynamics, reverberation of touching the sound and touching the color. The audience of the Goze songs felt the reality of the world with no visual sense and relived the training of touching the sound and the travel of touching the color. That is why they supported Gozes by a tacit spirit of mutual assistance under the harsh living environment in the pre-modern times. Akiyama-go, Sakae village in Nagano Prefecture, which is famous as a rarely visited region in Japan, also received a regular visit from Gozes until the 1940s. It is said that every year in September, Gozes stayed at different villagers' houses and enjoyed joining in the village festivals. An old man in his 80s who listened to the Goze songs in person said in retrospect, "I am thankful to Goze-san for coming all the way to visit with us in Akiyama-go. They are really respectable." The hospitable welcome from the villagers must have amplified the vitality of Gozes, who headed toward Akiyama-go by walking up the tortoise cliff path The culture of Gozes was a grand attempt by the blind women and the sighted people who went hand in hand together to make contact with the world with no visual sense. It can be said that the Goze songs are the art of the sense of touch, which integrates the skin sensation of the performers and the listeners. The Goze songs bring a comfortable feeling without the self-other distinction and put the listeners in a trance state. It is no coincidence that the impression and appreciation of the audience were expressed by the bodily reverberation, including hand claps and applause. What is realized in the trial and error process of touching the sound and touching the color is the equal relationship between the blind people and the sighted people. The culture of Gozes can be defined as the blind people's positive contact with the sighted people and the interactive communication of touching the heart. The modern period is the times when vision is dominant. To visualize the world with no visual sense by science is glorified as progress. In the advanced information society in which a slogan, the faster, the more, the better, is called for, the world with no visual sense came to be considered less serious. The bearers for the performing art of the blind are aging, and even in the field of education of the schools for the blind, the history of beaver playing minstrels and gozes are lost in oblivion. Another type of occupation which was established in the Edo period, 17th century, was massage, acupuncture, and moxipassion. We call it sanryo in Japanese. The so-called sanryo, sanryo means 3 therapies, is a manipulative therapy that examines the inside of the body, invisible world, on palpation using fingertips and palms. At schools for the blind after the Meiji period, the teachers have instructed people with visual impairments on the techniques of sanryo, massage and acupuncture. Surely, there was a transfer of culture from hand to hand. In recent years, due to the international trends of the inclusive education, quite a lot of children with visual impairment choose to attend a normal school instead of going to schools for the blind. If we aim to substantiate the inclusive society, maybe we should actively encourage people with visual impairments to attend a normal school. However, it should be noted that the schools for the blind have functioned as basis for handing down the tactile culture of people with visual impairment from the past to the future, since they were established. The blind schools in Japan have maintained the aspect of the school for the blind, as well as the tradition of the school of the blind. Following the recent policies worked out by the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, and Technology of advocating the philosophy of special needs education, the name of the schools for the blind throughout the country was changed to the schools with visual assistance. As the proverb says, names and natures do often agree. The schools with visual assistant focus on the education of complementing the deficiencies of the children with visual impairments. There is no place for consideration for teaching students the art of living without vision and the secret of touching the sound and touching the color. The one-sided idea of assistance involves risk of running into the logic of the strong, that the majority, sighted people, teaches and assists the minority, people with visual impairments. With the disappearance of Goze and the seeming arrival of the welfare society, where the rights of the people with disabilities are guaranteed, it is surely high time that we imagine their songs and reconsider the significance of the Goze culture of touching the heart. Okay, this is the end of my presentation, but before closing my presentation, I would like you to listen one more CD music. It is from Goze Uta, Goze song. And as I mentioned, in general, people think Goze Uta is very soulful and gloomy. But actually, of course, we have a lot of that kind of songs by Goze. But simultaneously, we have a lot of comic and bright and popular songs by Goze. So from now, I play CD music played by Goze. Her name is Ms. Ihira Take. Ihira was also very famous Goze, maybe same generation as Sugimoto. And Ihira played a lot of improvisation songs. And this CD was originally from live music in 1975, I think, in Tokyo. And it is interesting. This live was played by Ihira and with Japanese famous actor. He is very, very young, in his 20s, and he is popular among Japanese people. And of course, he is not blind, he is sighted. And he learned some Goze songs from Ihira. So this session, Ihira played shamisen, and this young actor sing a song. So it's a very kind of improvisation Goze music. So please enjoy the atmosphere of this song.
じゃあここら辺で漫才一発いきましょうか。漫才いいですね。漫才はまた今日はいいから。
This is a conversation between Ihira and a young actor.
この漫才というのは本当は2人でね。2人はけダメなの。
Manzai is a comic song, a Japanese comic song, played by two people.
あんたはけん気の毒だけども、なんだってわけんに限るから、それやったからちょっと手伝いしても。はい。急遽練習してちょっとやってみます。
So now Ihira is playing shamisen. It's completely different from you listened at my DVD.
ご そら来いそら来いとが来い来い来い才蔵なんぞがしゃべくり出したら止めどがねあぶくたったにいたったこらおろしごろの食いごろだめでたい中のその中に七福神がより集まったが大変じゃ七つの蔵をばこの屋敷キリさんとおったったこら豆蔵豆蔵おったった毘沙門銭蔵おったったこらホテさん七蔵おったった蔵おったった銭蔵おったった大僧じゃ酒蔵おったった新種じゃもろはく越後じゃ菊酒才蔵なんぞはええもんじゃ長いの調子を手に持ちて一兵二兵三兵飲んでは乗りつけ法制方法てってこという歌が台湾さんの旦那はいいとも才蔵毎度毎度
Okay, kind of please. So you realize some part the young actor forgot the lyrics of song. So Ihira-san taught the lyric to him. And of course, it's a little difficult even for Japanese people, for me, to understand the real meaning of this song. But I think you can enjoy the atmosphere of this. You can enjoy the atmosphere of this song. And maybe I cannot translate all lyrics into English, but maybe Dr. Kevin-san can translate it into Japanese, I hope. Anyway, thank you very much for coming. That's all.